Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. Do me a favor, you guys that are watching right now, just let me know that you could hear me. Let me know that my audio is good. I had to change some wires earlier today. I want to make sure we're good to go. Somebody give me an audio check. I see a bunch of you guys are on already. All right, good to go. Thank you, Jesse. Judge Cohen, what's going on, brother man? All right. So my name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and this is the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time at noon, where I take a topic that I share during the morning email, and I deep dive on it for a little bit. Sometimes we're talking for a little bit. Sometimes we're talking for a lot of it. But today's topic is a pretty interesting one. If you guys have not yet signed up to my email list, you go to masterchim.com and do that. I give you a free program for doing so. I just inhaled my lunch before this, so I am adjusting slowly. But go to masterchim.com, put your email in. You get a free email every day, and I just expound upon certain topics related to the things that I talk about. I get good feedback from those emails, and it's free. And just for doing that and giving me a shot to entertain you with my emails, I'm willing to give you a $47 program for free called Master the 24-Hour Cycle. It is for sale for $47 on my website, but sign up for the email list. You get a promo code. You get that for free. And you go to masterchim.com to get that. Aside from that, all the other relevant links are in the description. You have a T-shirt site that I sell my T-shirts. You have the book that I've written, TRIBALNOMICS, a whole bunch of good stuff. So you can check that out. All right. So topic at hand today, and I hope you guys enjoyed the what is it called? The title card? Thumbnail. That's the word I'm looking for, the thumbnail. Hope you guys enjoyed the thumbnail for today's show, where I have somebody in a suit that has a curious substance all over him, and it says rules are delicious. And he is the stereotypical rule follower, brown noser that we're going to talk about. So let's break down what that means, right? So whenever I start addressing what's up, Jamie? Good to see you. Whenever I start addressing Big Sean, what's going on? As you guys are jumping on, I appreciate it. When I start talking about what an individual identity is, we start with what are the things that he does, and then what is the perceived trajectory of what he does. So you have an individual who he gets up every day, he brushes his teeth, takes a shower, has some breakfast, gets on the train, goes to work, comes back. These are the rituals that populate his day. And when you have a conversation, or if you were to have a conversation with him regarding why it is those are the collections of things that he does with his time, why that is the sum total of his movement, we could say, he'll start to reveal, well, what he stands for, what he's about, what his goals and aspirations are, what his codes are, right, and things of that nature. And when we look at an individual, it's important to understand that is the sort of rule set, we could say, that he's playing by. Who he is very much a component of who or what he follows, right? What code that he is aiming his efforts toward. So all that being said, when we start talking about rule followers will have a set of codes that they will follow, that it almost happens in reverse order. Rather than having a personal set of codes and belief systems that populate our movements and that sort of create the references that we use to discern whether we should do this versus that, right? And should we do this for a living, or should we, instead of that for a living? Should we go here today, or that? Should I be this person's friend or not be this person's friend? Most people will have that internal set of codes that will determine, how they conduct themselves in the real world. Well, the thing about rule followers is they have a lot of that backwards. A lot of who they are, a lot of the certainty, and therefore the trust that they have in their ability to stay functional comes from external sets of rules. Now, sometimes a person who is a rule follower is very useful, right? It has a lot of utility, and we could say, depending on the level of historicity that some of the descriptions of samurai, conducted themselves as, we could say that the samurai archetype is one who is the ultimate rule follower. And there are certain classes of rule followers that we put on a pedestal in society. And a lot of those things, a lot of those archetypes of people, those rule followers that we put on those pedestals are people who have committed themselves to following a rule set where they could potentially lose their life, right? So the cost of entry, right, or the level of risk transcends their actual life. And we have value for individuals who commit themselves to those roles in society. Samurai would be an example of that. A lot of people in the military, there are some people in the military, and I've had, I have a lot of friends and allies who are retired from the military, still in the military, thinking about getting in the military. And you'll see a lot of times two sort of classes, two categories of people that I've been exposed to. And one class is the individual who he goes from one sort of band of brothers to another. And that sort of tribal aspect of loyalty and him being part of a tribe is how he defines himself in the military. But then there's the other type that they are in a sort of like, if kids used to like back in the day Toys R Us, dating myself somewhat, I don't think they exist anymore, but back in the day, as a kid, we'd go to Toys R Us. It was the huge toy store. Well, for the rule follower, being in the military is the Toys R Us, in their mind, because there is nothing but rules. And because there are more rules, there are more ways for those rule follower archetypes to express themselves. And they could feel the only way that they can grow is if there are more rules that they could demonstrate complying to. And it's the mechanism by which, again, they validate their identity. Not an admirable archetype to aspire to model, in the development of one's identity. Now, why is that? Because when you are a rule follower, and I've had these conversations with my children, my sons specifically, my daughter's still 8, so it's like, did you do your chores today? It doesn't really go a lot, past that on a regular basis. But my sons, 16, 13, and 11 right now, we've had conversations about the rules and about if you don't, if you're somebody who gets all of your worth through complying for rules, you're always going to be under the control of people who are controlling the rules, right? And when I titled today's talk, Rule Followers Will Destroy Us All, a conversation I've been having a lot lately, you guys remember, I don't know if it was last week or the week before that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was talking about those First Amendment auditing videos and how I had an appreciation for those videos because these guys are putting themselves out there and basically, demanding that they have the sort of full use and implementation of their rights, what are codified in the Constitution, completely devoid of any respect or concession for what is normal or what makes people comfortable. And again, that might not fare very well or popular in the relationships with the people that they're surrounding themselves by when they're doing these things, but that is not the battle that they're fighting. And I think it's somewhat commendable, because they don't care about being awkward or giving the old lady a hard time or these things, because, ultimately those people aren't in their tribe to begin with. And I've often said the Constitution is the compromise, right? It's like we have this Constitution. These are the rules that we all agreed to play by, right? And that's how you can have people from all walks of life, coexist functionally in a society. When you look at how people now look at what is acceptable, or what is the idea of the Overton window being, where is the current acceptable level of conversation when it comes to the extremes of a political position. What becomes normalized in everyday talk concerning politics? As that Overton window shifts, we start to see a move away from the overall collective understanding of the Constitution, and we start getting into the sort of these rules matter a little bit more in this situation. And there's a lot of illogical observations or criticisms to be made regarding that, but specific to the talk we're giving today, it's where these rule followers wind up doing the most damage, right? So I'm a big supporter of police in America. And what I mean by that is not the individual cops. Some of them are great. Some of them are fucking assholes. I mean the idea that this ain't going to work if we don't have cops, right? This whole American experiment, people refer to it as, like, it ain't working if there is not some sort of police force to regulate the deviant behaviors, especially in a mixed society like ours. Basically, you need those are the people that are enforcing the rules, but they should be enforcing them at the highest levels. Well, when you have sub-factions of the U.S. government, and they could be at a federal level all the way down to a state or local level, that have their own set of rules that contradict, those bigger rules, a lot of times you will have a rule follower in that situation, and their identity is developed in through the set of rules by which they get the most feedback, right? They want the feedback of compliance. So whatever they're getting the most feedback for is the one that they're more than likely going to gravitate toward. It's very hard for, let's just say, a cop in a scenario or in an agency that he's working where his immediate, surroundings are filled with people who are following their own set of rules that aren't connected to the highest set of rules, in this case being the Constitution. Very hard for him to exist there functionally because there is eventually going to be a tribal pressure, to adapt to the rules of the group, of the specific group. And that's a leadership thing. If from leadership, they're saying we are this other set of rules, not that, well, it's not really a mystery what everybody underneath that the influence of that leadership is going to reflect that same message. But again, so rule followers, they will be in a situation where they will gravitate towards those environments. And those leaders who are more tyrannical in nature, the leaders who are more self-obsessed, in their ambitions, they will find the rule followers, and they will, dare I say, weaponize those rule followers. And this is where we wind up having a liability, not only as a society, but just in general, just the dynamics amongst people. Find a tyrant who has an army of rule followers, and it's a problem, right? It's a problem because it's almost like, how Lego pieces will fit together. Well, if you want to really take a bunch of people and get them into a like-minded, unified approach to living, i.e. a culture, there's an organic process by which these people's identities find overlap with the message of the group, and then the rituals drive more overlap to where these people now see themselves as part of this group. And, it's almost like they're willing to sacrifice now for this group. There is an organic process by which that happens. But rule followers are like Lego pieces when it comes to making a culture, because you just give them a rule set, you give them the feedback, the positive feedback of proper compliance or successful compliance, and they're good to go. All their buttons are pressed, all their boxes are checked, they are fulfilled. And that's why rule followers are such a liability. Now, I will say that And if I look at the email that I wrote today, there's a line between trusted operator and pathological robot, right? So I've been a part of different groups during my life. And the thing about, being in a group, there's always going to be a hierarchy that develops organically. But functional groups that experience some form of or growing levels of sustainability, the identity that they're following is really what drives the hierarchy. It's the mission. It's best man for the job. It is an understanding that there is this external or transcendent goal that everybody is committed to, and the goal will create the hierarchy based on the individual attributes or temperaments of the people that are in the group. Well, what happens when you have a tyrant who is armed with rule followers? There is no gravitation towards a transcendent value, because the transcendent value, following that or complying with that transcendent value, is only going to give them an internal feedback. This should be self-satisfying feeling of a job well done, the fulfillment that comes along with doing good work by whatever your criteria for good happens to be. That does not resonate with a rule follower. A rule follower will rather have the guy who's in charge tell them good job. And that's the problem. When I look at some of these videos with like the ATF videos, where you have the ATF agents showing up at people's homes and trying to sort of trick them into allowing them in and showing them their firearms or complying whatever way that they're trying to get to manipulate them into complying for. You ask yourself the question. It's like, this guy that's doing this agent who's trying to trick a U.S. citizen, does he consider himself to be a good American? And I would say, yeah, I think there's a level of cognitive dissonance whereby these people don't understand the implications, the greater implications of the role that they're playing. Why? Because any curiosity that may arise internally as to whether or not they're being a good American in this particular case is quelled by the feedback, the positive feedback of their supervisor, their boss, telling them that they're doing a good job, right? Which is why you'll see a lot of rule followers gravitate and flourish in complicated hierarchical organizations, corporations and bureaucracies, and how these people oftentimes, when engaged with somebody who's outside of that, identity, they will not understand what the right thing is. All they can offer is what the rules say to do. And there's a sort of disconnect between people when one is addressing a rule follower, right? So I think, what are the values, or never mind values, what are the steps that we could take to address rule followers? Like, how do we identify them? I'd say, well, the first thing is we have to understand, again, a rule follower is somebody whose identity is driven through compliance. I am who I am because I follow these rules to the level that I do. These were the kids growing up that if they didn't get the best score, they felt inadequate. If the teacher asked a question, they wanted to raise their hand. They wanted that feedback of compliance. And a lot of the competitiveness of these people it stems from, well, if they are not competitive, they're not going to get that feedback. If they're not winning, they're not going to get the feedback from whoever's designing the rules. So you will see a lot of competitiveness and a lot of rule followers also. The sense of superiority that comes from, I need to get the feedback before they do. So these people who are disinterested in that feedback are lesser, right? Because they stand in the way of me and self-validation. And self-validation, ironically, coming from whoever's telling them they're doing a good job, right? So identifying these people is pretty easy. It's looking at them, and when they start speaking in a way that completely ignores what you would, logically, conservatively even consider to be the right thing, when they seem to have no idea the relevance of that or the role of that in the exchange that you're in, chances are you're dealing with a rule follower. So the way that rule followers are manipulated is by leveraging the rules, right? You have to use the rules to trick them. You have to show them that by following the rules, which are not your own, that exist in a way that they could see it, they're actually doing a better job of following the rules. And that's how you have to deal with them. The other way you deal with them is you make sure that they perceive you to be higher on the hierarchy of the organization than they are, because like robots listen to programmers, and that's and then that's something that's universal. So when you get a I don't mean to keep using the cop examples, but it's it's just such an easily understood one by everybody. Getting pulled over by a police officer, when you're dealing with a dick cop, right? And like, who knows if he's having a bad day, he's in a bad state, he's just bad at his job, or he's power tripping, or anything like that. But that he has the power of his authority that's granted him by the rules that's leading his actions. You'll see this with a lot of female officers. I gave an example, I think it was last week or the week before, about a female officer who was just acting inappropriately in my academy over a contract dispute, right, or membership dispute. Like there is a point where it's like they lose sight of what the actual variables that they're exposed to are. There's a great scene in that Batman movie with Bane where he has this little tyrant, basically gave him the keys to the kingdom in Gotham. And there's a point where the tyrant is telling him what to do. And Bane basically reveals that he's not the rule follower that the tyrant thought he was. And the tyrant says something, this little politician says something like, I've given you a fortune, or I've made you a fortune, or something to that effect. And Bane has that great scene where he lays his hand on the guy's shoulder and he goes, and this gives you power over me? Because up to that point, the tyrant is used to dealing with rule followers. They're used to dealing with people. Now, to the tyrant piece, where this comes into play, I've said before that a tyrant is a traitor maker, right? Tyrants create traitors. And the way that they create traitors is the people that they are being tyrants to either betray them, the tyrant, by telling them what they want to hear, right? Therefore being traitorous within the scope of that alliance, or the people who are being tyrannized betray themselves by sort of repressing their identity just to be able to comply. But from the tyrant's point of view, they demand something and the person does it. They demand something and the person does it. So from the tyrant's point of view, they think that they're dealing with rule followers because they don't know how to deal with somebody through any other level. So when you look again at people who are, are rule followers, you got to understand, like, sometimes tyrants will explain to them what to do. And if you're not higher on the hierarchy, like, that is not necessarily going to work. Logic or sort of common sense or decency or morality, like, these arguments are going to fall flat with the rule follower. There needs to be either a higher position on the hierarchy that you're speaking from, so you're the authority, that in order for them to get that compliance feedback, they need to listen to you, right? The cop pulls over the drunk driver. The drunk driver reveals himself to be, I should say, the rule-following cop pulls over the drunk driver. The drunk driver reveals himself to be the chief or somebody significant. You might have that rule-following cop, say, I'll do whatever you tell me to do because I'm a good soldier. I'm a good rule follower. Whereas somebody who is connected to the bigger mission might put the chief in handcuffs, in that situation. And we understand the gravity of and the weight of the pressure and friction that person would follow or would wind up being exposed to because of that. It's easier for the rule follower just to follow the rules, do what the boss says, that I'm compliant, right? So let me get some comments here. Corey, what's up? Johnny Groove in the house. What's up, brother, man? Cherry Town Vibe, what's up, brother? He said, yeah, follow the rules and end up fucked up anyway, right? Buck against the system and have been outcast. Might as well do what you want. Joe Crusoe, what's up, brother man? Good to see you. So the Cherrytown Vibes comment, might as well do what you want. Well, here's the thing. You're always doing what you want. And that's a realization that people need to come to, Another thing about rule followers is there's the deference of their autonomy. I'm just doing my job, If there was a individual who was told by his boss to come and harm one of my children, and I, as a result of this person looking to harm my child, look to harm him, it would not neutralize my intent at that point for them to say I was just following orders. It doesn't matter, because now you are considered an extension of that identity. So if you yourself have removed your identity out of your actions, well, then you are going to be treated as the other identity that you are following would have been treated. So the whole, hey, I'm just following orders, there's a great talk by I think it was Jordan Peterson. I heard him talking about the Judge Cohen. Yeah, it's exactly right. He puts up the concentration camp excuse. Jordan Peterson talked about, human nature and how a lot of people are very comfortable saying, I never would have, if I was there, I never would have joined the Nazis. I never would have done, and abided by or watched, all these atrocities happen, whatever. And Jordan Peterson makes the argument like, well, yeah, you would. Like, there's nothing that you've ever shown to demonstrate that you have the ability to maintain your integrity at that level of stress. I would add, the first time I'd seen this, some years ago, I would add that now it's almost a moot point given what we've seen with the COVID pandemic the last couple of years. How many people completely complied on both sides of the political spectrum with what the government told them to do, because they were pressured to a point where they almost were reduced to a rule follower, right? So there's a concept called the OODA loop, designed by Colonel John Boyd, describing the sort of cognitive loop, the cognitive awareness loop of fighter pilots, in war. And it's observe, orient, decide, act. Observe is what is the landscape, the map, you could say. Orient, where am I in this landscape? Decide, out of all of my options, which one am I going to choose? And then act, execute that chosen option. That's the OODA, O-O-D-A, the OODA loop that people are constantly processing. Well, what'll happen, and I've given the demonstration or the example of sparring, when people are learning first how to spar. One of the things that'll happen is, as they're overwhelmed, which happens very easily at the beginning because there's so many unknowns, they will turn their head, sometimes close their eyes, sometimes grab the person. And all of those actions are reductions in the map. So as soon as they close their eyes or grab or turn their head, there is less that they need to be aware of. They're reducing their perspective, because now it's easier to find themselves and then go about the rest of the process at that point. When things become too complex for them to process, there is a hesitation. There's a whole bunch of dysfunctional things that happen as a result of having your OODA loop, disrupted. So again, looking at rule followers and how, like in a Nazi concentration camp example, or I'm more comfortable giving the example of, the pandemic, people did not understand what was happening. A lot of their aquarium type realities, like imagine a fish in an aquarium and suddenly the aquarium water is dumped into the sea, right? Or into a lake, wherever these fish are naturally, habituated. Like you have these disconnects, where these people now are put in a situation where it's like, well, I don't know how to act. I don't know who I am because I don't know what to do. And, as soon as the pandemic happened and all these things were being taken away and changed, they found solace in a form of certainty by becoming rule followers. That is how they made sense of who they were. They needed rules to attach themselves to because that gave them the certainty to understand where they existed on their map. Now, the thing is, when people do the work necessary to develop who they are as an individual, without the influence or the reliance on the aquariums or even alliances in general. When you look at my book TRIBALNOMICS, there's a reason I start with self-alliance. It's like, who is the flawless, perfect version of you I call the pure self? Who are you now in reality, the real self? The self-alliance is your real self's friendship, almost alliance, connection to what the pure self is. Like, that all happens without any other identity playing a role. So if you're somebody who has squared away who you are and what you stand for, when the landscape changes, you know where you are, because the identity of your, the map of your identity exists internally, right? So I am not dependent upon somebody giving me a feedback. So the thing is, with rule followers, there are going to be some individuals who have more of a tendency, more of a temperament to be rule followers in a low pressure, almost default state. It's like, yeah, this guy's always following rules. This guy's an ass kisser. He's a brown noser, teacher's pet, things like that. We're used to labeling those types of people with. But when it comes to a level of pressure, most people, unless they've done that identity work, are going to be reduced to a rule follower as soon as they lose who they are because of the pressure they're facing, right? Hope that makes sense. Cherry Tavab, I think you wrote this a few moments ago, asked, why is it okay to use "I'm just following orders" as a cop-out? Isn't that just an excuse to hide behind a decision to be weak in the moment? Well, it absolutely is, for the reasons that I had mentioned before. But to summarize, it's you're removing your identity, and by trying to remove your identity, you're trying to remove the consequence. I'm not here. Talk to that guy. I'm not here, even though they themselves have played a role. And people who get their identity from external sources, they will be the ones who will find themselves in those situations. Because the thing is, if I say, hey, and this is going to get dark for a moment, as my analogies usually do, because it gets right to the point. If I said, hey, you have to kill these 5 babies or I'm going to kill you, there are going to be some people who are going to go, I'm not going to kill these 5 babies. And they'll go, I'll be willing to die. But if, I'm the dungeon master of this hypothetical, and some of the people actually watching this have gone through these types of exercises with me, it's like, well, what about 6 babies? What about 3 babies, but they're your babies? What are the names of your children? Let's say it's your children. Harry, Jenny, and Jeff. Harry, Jenny, and Jeff. Those are the 3 kids there. Either kill them or you die. Well, I would definitely die. Okay, it's 3 other kids. Well, I would still rather die than kill those other kids. Okay, either you kill these 3 strangers or we kill 3 of your kids. Well, I'm killing the strangers. 3 of those strangers or we kill 1 of your kids. Like, I could sit here and play the variables all day long, and all these exercises do is it allows you to build a relationship with who you are. I'm not saying that everybody, that there's a way where you're just not going to have a limitation, or you're going to be in a scenario where you have not done the work necessary to figure out which one saves your identity. Being stuck in a rock and a hard place a lot of times is it's a multi-decision ditch that you've managed to put yourself in. It's the guy who's joined the military, joined some sort of special ops unit, and is in a scenario where he has to do something that goes against every fiber of his morality. But who the fuck told you to join the military? Who the fuck told you to join this group? And a lot of times those guys will either become rule followers and say, well, I have to do what I have to do because of my, and it's like, okay, or you'll have the guy that's saying, no, I'm not going to do that, which you could say is somewhat admirable because he's taking a stand at a point, where he's not willing to cross a line he doesn't want to cross, or not willing to cross a line that would define him as somebody other than who he is, right? He wouldn't be able to live with himself after that. That's the phrase we use, right? Live with himself, right? So there's this dissonance that occurs if he were to do this thing, right? So we understand it in context. But then it begs the question, well, why did you join this unit to begin with? And if you're somebody who is who people rely on, you're a father, you're a husband, are there not scenarios that exist right now and possibility that would have you do that same type of reflection? Do I do this or do I do that? And, you might not be in a situation like that ever in your life, but I would say contemplating where you reside does nothing but strengthen your relationship with who you are. And you will be more inclined over time to make decisions that are more congruent with your identity, right? I use the example of my school. I remember, when I was investing more time in developing the MMA school, the MMA team in my school, we were very successful, regionally, a lot of promotions. We were one of the more dominant camps, and everything that's, connected to that. It never really meant much to me because to me, it was always about, these individuals just climbing the ladder. It was all about mastery. How do we become better, like being the winningest team? Like I didn't really give a fuck about that. But a funny thing happened, when we started winning a lot, I'd have people from other camps want to train at my school. Now, unlike the overwhelming majority of schools, I never let somebody leave their school to join mine. And to me, it was very simple because it didn't matter to me. This idea of being, the best MMA school, by winning percentage, and like that was not really a thing to me. It was that was the way, the platform that we pursued mastery. It was MMA at that point. So when people would offer to leave or ask if they could start training with me, I didn't want them there because whereas they would have been valuable in this one given direction, this one given application, a more successful MMA program, it also left me with somebody who that, well, what happens when there's someplace better than this? It's just a matter of time. And I would point it out to students, ironically, the students who eventually, wound up leaving anyway. It's like, see this guy that quit that school to join this school. Now, it's not to say I wouldn't let somebody join necessarily the school, but in terms of fighting for me, like, no, that's not, because it was never that important to me. I didn't care, about the, hey, John Jones wants to train in your school. Like, no, thanks. Like, I don't have any need for John Jones. I don't have any, well, he's the most successful guy right now. Like, it doesn't matter to me. He's not part of my crew. Like, he's not down with who we are. So it's a very powerful thing to have the ability to say, this is who I am and this is what I stand for, because you will not make decisions that wind up putting you in those binds later on down the road, and mind you, worth noting, and I throw this in there, regularly, I fucked all of these things up for years. And so I paid attention to what the mistakes I made. I paid attention to the clues that these things left and the lessons that they taught me. And I developed them. I built a relationship with them. And now it's a good time when you wake up and you're happy and you're in a good state and you're fulfilled and you know who you are. And, when the whole pandemic hit, my family, I mean, we were affected, of course, when it came to my income. My income was, I wasn't allowed to make money at the school. I was, there were like everything. Yeah, there were some new puzzles that needed to be figured out. But as far as who we were and being scared about, the end of the world, like that's not how we rolled. That's not, we're reliant upon these people to begin with. I would suggest to you guys, if some of these things that I'm talking about is still, you're really not understanding it, go watch some YouTube videos on the Amish during the pandemic, and have, there's a bunch of interviews. I saw one, I don't know the guy's name. I want to give him credit, and he doesn't need credit. He's got like millions of followers on YouTube, but he had this interview that I had done with this Amish family. It's like dinner with an Amish family, and you see this their reaction to the whole pandemic, and they're like, yeah, we really, it sucked putting masks on, to go into supermarkets. They were saying stuff like that, or like to get on a plane, you had to put a mask on, but and some of them go on planes and stuff. Like, you got to watch it. Shit made no sense to me. I understand it now a little bit more, but the whole idea is, well, who are you to begin with, and why are you letting all these other sources of information tell you who you are? I don't let other people tell me who I am. Well, when they start saying different stuff, why do you feel differently about yourself? Right? That's the test right there. You just failed it. I'm my own person. I don't follow anybody. I don't listen to what anybody says to do. But then when the people around you start saying different things, suddenly life is a different place all of a sudden. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not consistent. It makes sense. It makes sense as being inconsistent, right? So again, what am I advocating for here? I'm advocating for an individual spending the time to develop who he is. Understand that the rule followers, we're, without training, we're all a certain level of pressure away from saying the only way I know how to be me is if I follow those rules. And some people, they've done such little work. And a lot of times it's how you're raised, it's the environment you're raised in. When you have a household where children are never allowed to fail, or whether they fail or succeed is purely on whether or not they comply with their parents' orders, well, you're raising a rule follower when you do that, right? And it's a dysfunctional approach to a mixed society, certainly, but also from a leadership standpoint. They're looking from one set of rules to another, which means they're always going to be vulnerable to being controlled, right? All right, guys, I'm going to stop it there. I got out what I wanted. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Check out those links below. Like I said, if you don't get my email, go to masterchim.com and get on it. It's free. You get a program for doing it. I'm here every Wednesday at noon. I appreciate you guys watching this. I know you guys got stuff going on, so every minute you're investing in me is one that I'm grateful for. I will see you next week, same time, noon Eastern Standard on Wednesday. Have a great week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.